Hi, and welcome back to lab. This is, let me scroll down, we're week 11, OMG. All this stuff just went up, running a little late. So gross anatomy lab is what you want. You have two assignments this week. The traditional lab report, clay model, take pictures, blah, blah, blah. And then a little worksheet that I put together just to help you practice the muscles. You can find them both, of course, in the Gross Anatomy Lab page. They're both linked to on that. And this one, it appears as though I have to change the date on. There, now they both say the 15th, which is Sunday. I'm a day late getting this work done, so I gave you all an extra day to get it done yourselves. So if you click on Gross Anatomy Lab, this is what you are going to find. There is your lab guide. It will look like, where did it go? This. No, that's lab report. This is what your lab guide will look like. It's just one objective. It covers a whole lot of information, but it's just the one objective. The unlabeled images that's something you've seen before. It is a link to a Dropbox folder with all of these images that I believe, if one will open, are the same images that are in your lab guide, just without the labels. So you can print these out, cut them up, make flashcards, whatever you want to do with them. They are yours to play around with. The one objective is there. And then your two reports. So they're each on a different page, so you can turn them in separately. I didn't want to make sort of one big lab report because I think keeping the formatting looking good and legible would have been too big of a pain in the butt. So I split it up into two parts. That will cover last. The first thing I want to do is just briefly go over the lab guide, introduce a little bit more terminology, and give you an overview of sort of how you want to study. The first thing we want to understand is the term origin and insertion. So for that, we need this. All right, so this is, I just want my draw, there we go, my draw menu. This is the biceps. Let me pick a color here, that'll do fine, purple. So this is your biceps brachii. It is called that because it is a two-headed muscle in the brachial region of your body. So it's got not two attachment points, up here and here. These two parts of the muscle, when it contracts, tends not to move. So these we call, the origin. I'm just going to write no move. And then down here, so the two origins for the biceps brachii is the upper margin of the glenoid cavity, or superior margin of the glenoid cavity, and the coracoid process. And then down here, it attaches to the radial tuberosity. That is what we would call the insertion. And then the insertion is the end of the muscle that generally moves, so that when your bicep contracts, the insertion gets pulled closer to the origin and you get this movement here, which would be flexion. So for each muscle, you want to be able to identify the muscle and then state the origin, the insertion, and the action. If you've studied your skeleton and you know the origin and insertion of each muscle, then picturing how it's going to move the skeleton is going to be relatively easy. So that makes the action a little bit easier to remember. Getting back to then the lab guide, these terms down here, prime mover, agonist, synergist, fixator, antagonist, I tend not to use too much. Prime mover or agonist just means, as it says here, it is the principal muscle involved in a specific movement. So if you're doing curls at the gym, right, the biceps brachii is the prime mover of that motion. Sorry, let me just erase some stuff. Then here, where there's that little red arrow, that is what we would call a synergist. I do believe that's the brachioradialis. It also produces force that aids in flexion, but it doesn't produce as much force as the biceps brachii, so we call it a synergist. On the back of your arm is your triceps. I don't have a picture for that, but that's going to extend or straighten your elbow, so we would say that those are antagonistic pairs, the bicep and the tricep. I don't have an image for fixator, so I won't show you a fixator muscle. I will mention one later when we see it, but those are muscles that hold other things in place so that the origin stays put. Your shoulder blade, your scapula floats around, so there are a lot of fixator muscles that keep your scapula in place. Okay, so then what is it that you need to know? For each muscle, you need to be able to identify it and then state its origin, insertion, and the movement that it generates. If you scroll all the way to the end, 15, 16, and 17, this is the list of muscles you need to know. Then, as you're scrolling through here, we did give you relatively short, what's the word I'm looking for, descriptions of origin, insertion, and action. So gastrocnemius, medial and lateral condyle of the femur, so that would be the origin, inserts onto the posterior calcaneus and causes plantar flexion. Don't worry about tibia flexion, should get rid of that one. I don't even know what that is. It's plantar flexion. So use these tables embedded in here to learn your origin, insertion, and action. Then, let's see, we got all that. There's nothing new up here. I want to go through your list real quick. Point out a couple muscles that are hard to identify and point out a bunch that will not show up as identification questions because we don't have models that show them very well. We have one model that shows a lot of muscles very well, but it doesn't show up very often on the lab exam because it's only one model. So looking at the head, you can pretty much identify all of those muscles even on a relatively small muscle model that we're going to be using for the lab exam. The only one that wouldn't show up on the lab exam is buccinator. So if you want to write no lab exam next to that, go right ahead. Sternocleidomastoid, easy enough to find. The abdominal muscles get a little tricky. So one I will point out, where is it? Number 2, transversus abdominis will not show up as something to identify on the quiz or the lab exam because our models do not illustrate it very well. Let's see. Here, there they are your abdominal muscles on this model is in our lab, but this is not the model we use for the lab exam. I wanted to give you a model to work with, but not the one that will be on the exam. They're similar enough that you should be fine. So what you can see on this model is in the middle, here and over here in this other view. That is rectus abdominis. Here it is sort of uncovered, and here it is covered by what is sometimes called the rectus sheath or an aponeurosis, which is just a name for a very wide flat band of tendinous connective tissue. This white aponeurosis is connected to these muscles over here, these are your external obliques. And then on the other side, down here, you can see your internal obliques. So when you're looking at models on the exam, you want to pay attention to the direction the fibers are running in. If the fibers, as you go from lateral to medial, go down, that's external. If when you go from lateral to medial, some of them go up or just straight across here, that's your internal oblique. So try and figure out a way to remember external down, internal up, so you don't confuse those two. Transversus abdominis would be deep to all three of these, and it runs in the transverse plane, horizontally across your stomach, and that's the one that you generally use to suck in your gut if you're trying to get on a tight pair of pants or something. So that's just a little heads up on the abdominal muscles because they can be a little bit confusing. Serratus Anterior is fine. That is an example of a fixator muscle. Why don't we look at those real quick because they're pretty. This is the best image we have. Oh, here. Oh no, here's better. There, and there. Those are your serratus anterior muscles. It looks kind of like a serrated edge. And they originate from your scapula and insert onto your ribs, as you can see over here. And what they actually do is hold your scapula in place when you're pushing forward on something. So if you're doing push-ups, they keep your back from collapsing, or they keep your shoulders from rolling back. So they fixate your scapula while other muscles that are attached to your scapula can generate movements. Those are your scalenes, just for fun. Or excuse me, not scalenes. Serratus anterior. Scalenes is another one you can cross off your list. It does not show up well on most of our models. You might have to answer thought questions, origin, insertion questions, which of the following muscles does this or does that, on any muscles on the list. But the ones that I tell you don't show up on the model, you don't have to worry about identifying. Levator scapulae, don't worry about identifying that one. Also the intercostals and the diaphragm, don't worry about identifying those. You do want to know what they do. We chose these two because we have one exhalation muscle and one inhalation muscle. So your internal intercostals help help bring your ribs together. I won't go over all the mechanics of it, but basically each intercostal muscle originates from one rib and inserts onto the rib above it. So when they all contract together and the bottom of your rib cage is fixed, it pulls down your ribs, or it pulls down your rib cage to help you exhale. And then your diaphragm only helps you inhale. So it's a dome-shaped muscle with the dome going up into your thoracic cavity. And when it contracts, it flattens out. So when that dome flattens, you're increasing the volume in your thoracic cavity by a certain amount, which decreases the pressure, and that allows air to flow in. When you exhale, your diaphragm simply relaxes. It doesn't contract and push air out. One of the things you want to get used to thinking is that muscles always shorten and they only generate force in one direction. So any muscle can only move a joint in one direction. This is why we have agonists and antagonists, and this is why you always say flexion or extension. No muscle can do both. If you hedge your bets and write flexion and extension, thinking I'm going to give you half a point, I will take a full point away. I'll be tempted to take away 5, but I won't do that because I'm not mean. The class is mean, I'm not. Let's see, shoulder muscles, deltoid, that's easy enough to identify. These others, teres major and your 4 rotator cuff muscles, just know what they do. I'm not going to ask you to identify them. They're all small and they don't do really big major movements. Most importantly, A through D here, if I ask you which of the following is a rotator cuff muscle, or if I ask you to list on the lab exam what are your 4 rotator cuff muscles, you want to be able to rattle those off. Biceps, triceps, brachioradialis, easy enough to identify. And most of the stuff on the leg too, there's just a couple things I will point out. And also I'll mention your vastus intermedius. Don't worry about that, will not be on the lab exam because it doesn't show up well or at all really on the muscle model we use. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything. So for your legs, the way I remember is if you look like this goes down and those go up, I envision kind of a V type thing happening here. A V type thing. That sounds like it should be a song or something. Actually, it just reminds me of an old Stone Temple Pilots song called Sex Type Thing, which you don't need to know the lyrics of because it's inappropriate, I think. Doesn't matter. I'll stop now. So this V is what makes me think of my 2 vastus muscles, and the one on the inside is vastus medialis, the one on the outside is vastus lateralis, and this is your rectus femoris. Rectus muscles run straight up and down, and that's why this is called rectus femoris, because it runs straight down your femur. This is called rectus abdominis because it runs straight down your abdominal cavity. And then if I were to remove this piece of plastic here, this muscle, oh, I tried to make a star, that didn't work. Star. I can't do stars. Oh my god. Oh, now I have to know how to do a star. How come I can't do stars anymore? There's a star. At any rate, if you remove that muscle, I'm being really silly, underneath it would be vastus intermedius. Let's see, make sure I didn't miss anything important. Again, so you're not going to identify that one, but those you want to be able to identify. Sartorius and gracilis are easy enough to find on your own, as is your buttocks. Most people know how to find the glutes. Before I go back to the pictures, let me just say these are all non-identify muscles. So adductor magnus, adductor longus, and the iliopsoas, just be able to answer origin, insertion, action questions on them. Then what we'll do is we'll go over your hamstrings and the muscles in your leg because those get a little tricky. All right, so hamstrings. This is the back of your leg. There's the butt. Your other half of your butt would be here, or your other gluteus maximus would be here. So this is medial, this is lateral. So that makes this here your biceps femoris, BF. And then here you actually have 2 different muscles. And let me get maybe just a finer point on this. We'll see if I can draw this. So you start up right there, and then the line goes down here. I don't know if you can see, sort of follow the line I'm trying to draw here. Oops. Oh my god, I'm a horrible artist. And then here, up to there. So that is one muscle right there. That is your semi-tendinosus. And then if you look real close, there's some muscle here that I'm outlining in purple. And some of it's over here. Whoops, 2, it's this part. I'm not drawing it very well. But you see that there's a little bit of muscle there and a little bit of muscle here. That is your semi-membranosus. So what I remember is that the T is on top and an M is wider than a T at the bottom. So down here at the bottom is where the two sides of your semi-membranosus stick out from underneath your semi-tendinosus. So tendinosus, top, membranosus, wider at the bottom. That's how you can identify them. So just be aware of that. Then looking at here, this is the front of the leg. Here's your knee up there. That makes this your tibia. So right next to it is going to be tibialis anterior. It's just that simple. And if you look at where it ends, oh, my mouse was stuck for a second. It inserts onto the tarsals and I think part of your first metatarsal. So it's not going to move your toes, it's going to move your whole foot. And it's going to plantar flex it, right? It's going to pull up on the top of your foot and point your toes towards your nose. This right next to it, if you just follow it down, you'll see it's connected to all these tendons here that run out to your toes. So this one is your extensor digitorum longus. So if this muscle contracts, it pulls on all of these tendons and that pulls your toes straight. Going around to the back, this big muscle here is your gastrocnemius. It is the calf muscle that most of you want to make big if you want calf muscles. There is one underneath it here. This muscle here. So these look like the same muscle because they're the same piece of plastic. But they are anatomically distinct and can be controlled a little bit differently. So this that I just outlined in green there, that's your soleus, that's your gastrocnemius. They both insert onto the calcaneus, and so they're going to pull up on the calcaneus when they contract, which means your toes are going to go down. You're going to point your toes down because your ankle here acts like a fulcrum. When you pull up back here, that part goes down. And then if you look real close, just for fun, those of you that like to go to the gym, if you read, you will notice that your gastrocnemius originates from the condyles of your femur. So it crosses the knee joint, which means if you're bent at the knee, if we go back, I don't know, here it doesn't do it as much justice, right? But if you bend at the knee here, then you're taking tension off of the gastrocnemius and you're not using it as much. So if you're doing toe raises at the gym and you want to build up your calves, do straight-legged toe raises, like with the squat bar across your shoulders, or if you're doing like a leg press machine, bend at the knee a little bit. Don't ever completely lock out your knees with a lot of weight, but flex your knees a little bit and then do mostly straight-legged toe raises. Then, last but not least, let me just get rid of that, and that is this muscle right here. You just want to envision it running down underneath all of this, and it basically uses this, your lateral malleolus right here, kind of like a pulley, and it inserts onto these tendons down here. So when these get pulled on by that muscle, right, it causes your toes to curl or flex. So that is your Flexor digitorum longus. So as you're studying this, especially as you're working with your skeleton, make sure that you're thinking about origin, insertion, and then envision the origin getting closer to the insertion, and then understanding or remembering what the muscle does is simply a matter of applying the information that you already know. Just bring the origin closer to the insertion in your mind, and you'll be able to say whether your hip is flexing or extending So let's then talk about what you need to do, because I haven't even done that yet. You got two things to do. One is clay modeling, which we've been doing a lot, or a fair amount of. So if you click on that, it looks like this. If you open your lab report, what I originally envisioned as your lab report, it'll look like this. It's really just all of the muscles from your lab guide. The ones that are crossed off, you don't have to make out of clay, but do all of the other ones. It will take a while. There's a lot of muscles, but they don't have to be perfect. You don't have to make each and every one of your serratus anterior muscles. But do the best you can. Get pictures of them. You can either label the pictures or try putting labels on the skeleton. I don't know if it'll stick to the clay or not, but do your best. If you have to abbreviate because your labels are small, that's fine. Abbreviate. So just do your best on that. And then the other thing, if you click here, it's just practice. So I took some of the images we were just using and made PowerPoints. Oh, before it was opening, that's weird. Before it would open right in Canvas. I'm not sure why. Oh well. So this is what it looks like. It's a PDF of PowerPoint. And so if you look, the muscles on each slide are labeled A through whatever. Then you have an answer sheet, which will look like this, a Word document. I thought the Word document would be easier to work with than trying to insert labels onto a PowerPoint slide. So just fill this out. There's 11 slides, 11 things to answer here. So slide 1 is A through E, so just type in A through E. Oh, it should be A through D. I take it back. I must have misread it. Oh, that's really crazy. Oh no, there is an E. I'm sorry. There's the E. All right. I'm not crazy. So yeah, you've got your clay. I don't know how many pictures it's going to take you to get all of the muscles. Don't feel like you have to take beautiful pictures of everything and a different picture for each muscle. Just, try and get as many muscles in each picture as you can so it's not too laborious to take all the pictures. And then this is just a matter of filling out the Word file and submitting that. So this is all you need to submit. There's nothing that you need to do with this. But you could obviously also print this out and use it as a study guide should you want to. Oh, and I forgot. I included this picture here because I highlighted the different hamstrings here, and then I wanted you to see them without the highlights. So that's it. Good luck with everything. Let me know if you have any questions.